you watched the first video, you would have seen how I got this saw off the truck and into my shop. And, well, it's sitting in my shop on the pallet on a cart. And I just kind of rocked it off that cart onto the ground. And once the pallet was on the ground, there were 4 brackets on it that had some short lag bolts holding them. So I just removed the lag bolts, and the brackets basically just slipped right off. And it allowed me to just kind of rock the saw slightly off the pallet and get it back down on the floor where I could start assembly. Now, the first thing I had to do is there's a bracket that keeps the motor from bouncing around during shipping. And basically, you just take the hardware out of that and remove that bracket. It's only a shipping bracket. You no longer need it. Then there was the tilt handle that had to be put on. Now, that came with a key to slide in there. So you put the handle on, slide the key in, and then you just tighten up the Allen screw that is in the handle with an Allen wrench. Next thing, you have to screw in the little handle for it, and that's just a matter, threading it in and then just giving it a little snug it up with a wrench. And then the last thing to do with the tilt is to just put the lock knob in there, and that knob just allows you to tighten it down and lock it on the angle. Then there was a cover that went on that side. I figured I'd just drop in place a couple of pins in the hinges that you just line up, drop it in place, and then it snaps closed. Then I decided to get down to the cleanup part, and here you can see how the that router table extension came packed. It had a couple of rings in it, and there were some brackets for the safety guard for the if you use a router. These are the metal brackets, and there was also a plastic ring in another box. And everything was packed well, and it was time to start cleaning it up. And before I flipped it over, I decided to clean all that goop off the router mounting area, and I just used some WD-40 and paper towels. And then I just flipped it over, and same thing, everything was really well protected with Cosmoline or whatever they used, and had some cellophane over it and wrapped in cardboard, so the castings arrived in really good shape. Now, this one was real easy to clean up. The WD-40 seemed to dissolve the whatever they used on it real easy, and it was just a matter of spray some WD-40 and then wipe with some paper towels and just keep switching out the paper towels as they get real nasty. Make sure you get all the edges and everything too when you clean it off, because those mating surfaces square it up. And here's the other shorter extension for the left-hand side. Same thing, came in a nice cardboard box, and then it was also wrapped in a like a cellophane or plastic wrapper. And this one had a little bit harder, thicker layer of protectant on it. So wound up doing, going about it the same way, spraying some WD-40 on it. But this one I had to actually spray it pretty good and then let it sit for a couple of minutes to get it loose. And then I used a piece of like a 1/16 of an inch thick veneer to just kind of help loosen it up, because this stuff was a little bit harder than the other stuff. And also make sure that you clean up all the edges as you go, because like I said, these are ground mating surfaces that are going to pull everything flat and square later. Then the next thing you have to do before you clean the tabletop is take off the bolt holding the start switch, power switch on it, and just let that hang aside, and then take the hardware out of there and clean up the top surface and all the edges the same. So pretty much everything is ready to start assembly now. Now the cast iron extensions were fairly heavy, and I had no help, so I just took and clamped a couple pieces of flat wood across the top of the saw. And then when I brought the extension over to it, I used a couple of clamps to basically hang it in place off of the 2 pieces of wood that I had, the 2 strips of wood that I had clamped on the tabletop. This made it really easy to get everything aligned and held in place without getting hurt. So you get it up in place, and then I got the bolts in, and I snugged them up slightly. I didn't really tighten them, but I snugged them up, and then I went back with a dead blow hammer and block of wood, and I just started tapping things around until they got really, flush and level. And then I went back and I tightened up all the bolts really good. And I did get a really good alignment on the table on this side. This one fit together easy, no problems. And putting a straight edge on it, it's just about dead flat across the saw and that table. So then, with that table mounted, it's just a matter of mounting the on-off switch. And there's a flathead screw that's included that you mount. And then there's another bracket in a box that you need to support the other end of it. And that goes up under one of the corner mounting holes of the saw, actually the base of the table. And then it goes down to the back of that mounting bracket. And it uses a nut and bolt that is ready in place holding the switch on. You can see it there. So you just put it on there and tighten everything down. The switch came with a lock in it, and this lock has some really strange keys, so you never want to lose a key to this lock. But it is a good feature to, give you something to lock it. And then they also put a little hook there you can hang it on so you don't lose it, which is a good feature. Now the motor cover came in another box, and that was in really good shape. So it's just a matter of putting a couple of pins in, and you just have to line it up with the two round barrels, and then slide the pins in, and everything fit real nice. Then there's a little latch that goes on there that you have to screw in, and it's kind of spring loaded closed, so you have to just hold it open and put the nuts on it, and it's just a matter of 2 nuts and bolts and tighten them up, and the latch is mounted. Everything really was well made. It really just had a beautiful powder coat finish on everything, and it just fit together so nice. Here you can see the latch. It's kind of a tough pull to get it locked, but it really locks it closed good, and there's no vibration in it either. So then there's a couple brackets that go on the side of the saw for hanging the miter gauge on, and I actually hang the dado insert on there too. So that's just there's four screws and an Allen wrench that come with it, and you just have to just thread them in and tighten them up, and that takes care of that side of the saw. Then you go around to the back, and there's a couple of screws that you have to remove to put a dust shield on. Now there you can see my dust collector hose, and as you can see, I have a copper wire in all of my dust collecting system because it's a plastic system, and you always want to ground to your machine. So here you just have to put the little adapter on the back, make sure that that round section is up so that you get equal distribution between that round hole, which is the hose from the blade guard, and then the other slot that is the bottom of the cabinet. So then you just put the hose on, and I hook the ground wire up to one of those screws. So then next the instructions said to put the fence rails on before putting the other extension table on. So you just start with the front, and there's two bolts, washers, and lock washers that go on, and you get them snugged up, and you actually line up that top of that with the bottom of the chamfer on the front. Then there's the box with the 2 legs that come in there, and you screw those little leveling studs up in the bottom, screw them up enough so you can get them in place. And then there's just 2 flathead screws that mount the legs. One goes right through into a threaded section in the top of the leg, and the other one just requires a nut and a washer on the back to hold it. So I got this lined up good with the bottom of the bevel in the top of that. So now it's time to just put the back one on, and the back rail I didn't really line up or anything. I just put that on with the screws snugged up, and I figure I'll go back later after everything is assembled and do the final alignment of that one. So same thing, you have the 2 bolts that hold it in place, and then you have the other leg that goes on there, and it's just the flathead screw goes down into the middle of the leg, top of it is threaded. And then the other screw goes through a hole and put a nut and lock washer on the bottom of it. So, with everything tightened up here, then it's time to just drop the router table extension into the between these rails, and I left that one kind of loose so it would fit. And I didn't have any help, so basically what I did, same thing here, is I clamped a piece of wood onto across the top of the extension to hold that end up. And then for the other end, I just kind of wiggled it until I got it down in between the rails there. And for the other end, it was just a matter of just picking that up and getting the bolts all started loosely, and then getting it roughly aligned, and going back and snugging up the bolts and just tapping it until everything was perfectly level. And I was able to actually use that the rail there a little bit to help me, because it had a slight bow in the middle of it that I was able to just pull out by tapping it a little bit. So everything basically in the end wound up really just about perfectly flat. There's no shimming necessary or anything else like they told you. You could use masking tape if it was off one way or the other, but everything just bolted up perfect. And then go back through, and this is the mounting the front rail to the router extension, and then there's a tube that gets mounted on there for the fence to ride on. And you have to read the instructions and use the proper amount of shims for it. For my case, it was just one of those nice thick washers that they give you. So you put the shim in place between the angle and that rail there, and then you fiddle around until you get the bolts lined up, and just kind of make sure that the shim is still in the middle of the bolts, and then just tighten them all down. And I just kind of tapped it to one side of the holes just to make sure that it was parallel with the front of the table, and then tightened everything down. Then I went back to the back of it now, and I did the final alignment on that back rail, and that one goes flush with the top of the table. So basically, I just loosened the bolts up a little bit, flushed everything up using a stick, and then went back and tightened everything down. Then you can just drop the fence on and try it and check it. It went on real nice, and it does glide really nice and smooth. Everything worked out good, so I'm real happy with that. It seems to be a real sturdy fence too, so we'll see. And it was a matter of cleaning up the little insert for the router and putting that in. Now that's sat a little bit low in the opening there, so I'm going to have to make a shim for that. Now it came with a 40-tooth combination blade, and I figured I'll just put that on for now until the good one that I ordered comes. So that was just same as any other saw. Just drop the blade in place. There seemed to be a good amount of clearance to get in there and get the nut started and tighten it. So I was happy with that. I think the opening's a little wider than my old contractor saw was. So with that in place, next thing I did is I dropped that splitter for the guard in the back there. And there's a little cam that you have to loosen up and then lock down. And they tell you that, just check that it's centered on the blade. So, all I did is I just put it in place and then put a straight edge up against here. And just, checked it. Everything actually was pretty good. I gave it a little bit of a twist and bend, but everything worked out good. And then there was the blade guard that came packed well, and that was a real nice looking guard. So just a matter of putting in the table insert first, and there were 4 screws in there that are just an Allen head set screw that you go down and you level that up, and it worked out pretty good. You can level it up to get it perfectly flush with the tabletop using those screws, and then just put the splitter back in there for the guard, and then just slip the guard on, and there you have it. It's basically all assembled. Then the next thing to do was to level it up. So I had some real high density rubber matting that I put some pieces under each corner to keep it from contacting the concrete floor. And it just so happened that from side to side it was perfect, but from front to back it was off a little bit. So I just cut some plexiglass shims and split them under the rubber, and I got it perfectly leveled up. Then I went over to my router and I needed some just round pads to put under those extension levelers. They, were just a metal on the bottom, and I did not want them to rust from being in contact with the concrete floor. So I just cut out a couple of UHMW rounds quickly for, to isolate them, and just they fit right underneath the little levelers. And I was going to glue them on, but I decided to just, set them in place for now. So just I just snugged them down so I didn't, affect the level of the saw. And then just tighten up the jam nut there against the bottom of the leg. And that'll keep it from moving later. So there you have it. Just, get those two leveled up. Everything's level now. I checked the stops on the 90-degree stop, and that seemed to be really basically perfect. And then I just wanted to check the blade to the miter gauge slot. So I put an indicator on there, ran it back and forth, and that came out really perfect. There was a little hollow spot in the blade, but the two edges were perfect. So then the next thing to do is to put the scale on. And I always, before I stick anything on, I always use IPA alcohol isopropyl to clean off any wax or grease or anything. And then you just sort of set that little piece of plastic with the bubble. It would in the middle of the mounting screws for it in those slots. And then all I did is I just kind of eyeballed that tape where it would be and put a couple pieces of masking tape to hold it in place. So there you can see I got that set at 0, and I actually have the fence tight up against the blade. So next thing I did was I just started peeling back that backing off of it, and just tried to keep everything straight, square, and everything to where it was, and started sticking it down. And then, once I got it started, I was able to just peel that backing off, and it just laid down really nice and flat with no bubbles or anything. So if you take your time, it's a real easy job. And, I just used some tape to kind of hold everything in place so it would be in the right place when I got done. Now, one thing that I noticed with this fence is, unlike my contractor saw, it doesn't have a fine adjust knob on it. So really, when you go to try to line it up with something, you have to just kind of keep tapping it back and forth to get in the exact spot that you want. And you have to make sure that you look straight down at that little round spot there, because it's like a magnifying thing. Then the next thing I did is I went back and I put 2 coats of Johnson paste wax on all the cast iron surfaces. So I just took a cloth and spread that, and then you buff it off, and I let it dry for a little while, and then I went back and did a second coat on it to try to coat the cast iron. Then the last thing I did is the same thing everybody else seems to do with a table saw, is I laid 2 nickels on the table. Now that took some time to get them standing up like that, and then I turned on the saw and just to see what was going to happen with the nickels. And here you can see that the saw is running and the nickels are still sitting there, and nothing's moved. So I guess it means it's a good and vibration-free saw. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.